The story begins in a time when survival wasn't theory, philosophy, or weekend bushcraft, it was the daily mechanic of life. Medieval Europe faced a paradox that still shocks modern historians. They possessed a wood preservation method so effective, so durable, so nearly indestructible that governments later restricted or outright banned parts of it. Not because it was mystical, not because it came from an alchemist's notebook, but because it worked too well, consumed too many natural resources, and threatened entire forests when people began using it everywhere. It was practical chemistry developed long before the word chemistry even existed, born from necessity, refined across generations, and applied by carpenters, shipwrights, bridge builders, and rural craftsmen who understood their materials at a level we rarely match today. And if you work with outdoor wood, tool handles, cabins, garden structures, homestead fixtures, or survival gear, you can still use this old method to produce results that outperform some modern commercial treatments. So, it began with an understanding that fire alone could change wood, but not enough for long-term survival. Medieval craftsmen routinely fire-hardened spear tips, shields, and tool handles, and archaeological finds show some of these char-hardened items surviving for centuries. But the real breakthrough happened when they paired controlled charring with tar saturation, discovering that the two together produced wood that resisted rot, moisture, insects, ultraviolet exposure, marine borers, and fungal decay with almost unbelievable longevity. Some structures treated this way, especially in Scandinavia, are still standing more than 800 years later. It's not legend, it's physics and chemistry working in harmony. The principle was so simple anyone could use it, but honestly, mastering it took experience. First, craftsmen lightly charred the wood, just enough to blacken the surface and open the pores without burning through the structure. This thin char layer formed a carbon shield, repelling water, blocking sunlight, and creating an environment where bacteria and fungi struggled to survive. But, charring alone wasn't the secret. The real magic came when they followed it with natural tar, pine tar, pitch, or resin extracted from resin-rich conifers. When tar was heated and applied to gently charred wood, it soaked deep into the grain. It filled microscopic capillaries, squeezed out oxygen, waterproofed every fiber, and created a chemical barrier that insects and microbes simply could not penetrate. The char protected the tar protected the wood, and honestly, the result was a form of medieval composite material that modern pressure-treated lumber still tries to imitate. Shipwrights were among the earliest experts. Their guilds guarded tar knowledge fiercely, because without it, ships rotted, warped, or cracked long before their time. Scandinavian stave churches owed their longevity to tar saturation. Rural communities treated fence posts, grain stores, barn timbers, and well frames the same way. In harsher climates, especially in the north, tar wasn't optional. It was the line between a structure lasting 5 years and a structure lasting 50. Because tar came from slow-growing pine forests, medieval Europe eventually faced a resource crisis. Tar pits consumed entire pine stands. Resin-rich heartwood was harvested faster than forests could regenerate. By the late medieval period, the demand for tar in shipbuilding alone was so overwhelming that governments intervened. In Scandinavia, England, and parts of France, laws restricted who could produce tar, who could harvest resin-rich pine, and in some regions, even who could apply tar-treated timbers in urban areas. It wasn't the preservation method that was dangerous, it was the ecological pressure created by how wildly successful the method was. Later, in more modern times, environmental regulations further restricted pine tar usage because, poorly refined tar contained compounds considered unsuitable for certain settings. But again, the method didn't disappear because it failed. It faded because it succeeded just a bit too well and, honestly, demanded too many natural resources. Today, with sustainable sourcing, scaled-down application, and refined natural tar products, anyone can use a version of the medieval method safely, effectively, and without violating environmental concerns. The steps remain straightforward and, deeply practical. Alright, so, choose a wood piece, either pine or hardwood, that's fully dry. Next, apply controlled charring using a propane torch or, some hot coals, rotating the wood until you get an even, shallow black layer, then go ahead and wipe off the loose soot. This process, basically, mimics the old practice of opening the pores and creating a protective shell. So, first, heat natural pine tar or a pine tar linseed oil mixture until it becomes thin and brushable. Back in the day, medieval craftsmen would heat tar in iron kettles over a fire, but nowadays, a small metal can in a pot of hot water works just as well. Once it's warmed up, brush the tar onto the warm wood so it can, penetrate deeply. Many old-world artisans applied multiple coats over several days, and honestly, modern homesteaders do the same. As the tar cures, it hardens inside the wood, forming a long-lasting barrier that resists rot, insects, and moisture cycles. When done properly, this method produces wood with, remarkable durability. A fence post treated this way can last far longer than untreated lumber, and a tool handle becomes resistant to cracking, shrinking, and even microbial damage. Hiking staffs, garden stakes, trap parts, bows, and cabin timbers all benefit from the same technique. What makes this process so impressive is not just its longevity, but how it reflects the knowledge of pre-industrial societies. These craftsmen didn't have pressure chambers, synthetic preservatives, or industrial solvents. They had fire, resin, tar, heat, and an intuitive understanding of how materials behaved when exposed to the world. They created durable solutions with simple tools and natural ingredients, solutions that lasted centuries and still outperform many modern wood treatments, especially in wet, cold, or variable climates. Studying these old techniques shows that durability doesn't always require advanced technology. Sometimes the older method is actually superior because it's simple, renewable, and, it's been field-proven over generations. Medieval woodworkers didn't build structures to last just a decade, they built them to survive lifetimes. And, the fact that so many of their tar-preserved structures still stand today is proof that their method worked exceptionally well. If this kind of forgotten engineering fascinates you and you want more deep dives into ancient, medieval, and wartime techniques that still apply to modern life, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and share this guide with fellow enthusiasts. Preserving this knowledge isn't just historical curiosity, it's practical wisdom that really deserves a place in the modern world.